Houthi rebels in Yemen say they've built their own surface-to-air missile. It comes days after Saudi Arabia said that it intercepted a ballistic missile that was fired towards its territory. So is there an end game to this near 3-year conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. It's a new year, but the same old story in Yemen. Nearly 3 years on since the Saudi-led coalition began its military campaign, more people are dying. At least 11 were killed in a Saudi airstrike on Wednesday that targeted a market in northern Saada province. That region is a stronghold of Houthi rebels who've been in control of much of the country since 2015. Well, the fighting has killed at least 10,000 people and displaced millions more. Just this week, Houthi rebels announced that they've built a new, locally designed missile to fight against the Saudi-led coalition. And now the rebels are threatening to block the Red Sea shipping lanes if the coalition keeps pushing towards the western city of Hodeidah, which the Houthis control. Well, the UN has called Yemen the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with 8 million people on the brink of famine. Thousands of others are suffering from malnutrition and disease, including cholera. And on Tuesday, the World Health Organization said that more than 500 people have been infected with diphtheria. 48 of them have died since the outbreak began in August. So let's bring in our guests. In Yemen's capital, Sana'a, we're joined by Hakim Al-Masmari, editor-in-chief of the Yemen Post. Nabil Khouri is the former deputy chief of mission with the US Embassy in Yemen. He joins us from Washington, D.C., and finally, from London, Andreas Krieg, Regional Defence and Security Specialist and Assistant Professor with King's College London. Welcome to you, gentlemen. Andreas, let's start with you. In December, there was something like a 67% rise in the number of bombing raids carried out by the coalition. Recent reports would have us believe that the Saudi-led coalition has now begun to make progress on the ground against Houthi rebels. Is that indeed the case? Is the coalition now beginning to win this war?
No, we're far away from it, unfortunately. This conflict is, going into its 3rd year and going actually almost into its 4th year. I mean, this has been going on. It's a tit for tat with shifting alliances on the ground, where international backing, particularly from the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are playing one side of the conflict against the other. And, we have to make sure to say that there is no binary side to this conflict. This is not a binary conflict. This is not one side versus the other side. This is a multipolar conflict where different people are shifting around all the time. So, there are different battlefields with different actors in different spaces around the country. And yes, on some of these fronts, there are sometimes some progress is made, on other fronts, progress is not made. The problem generally is with this air power-led operation is that targeting is very poor. There's very poor intelligence on the ground in determining where the targets are and who you want to target. If you actually look at the numbers, 2/3 of all of these airstrikes that have been conducted by the Saudi-led coalition have actually missed their target or hit civilian targets. And I would suspect that the Saudi-led coalition didn't want to actually hit civilian targets, but they did. So it's from an air power point of view, it's been very unsuccessful actually to enable people on the ground, because air power is always there to support forces on the ground, and the forces on the ground have shifted. The previous allies that the UAE and Saudi were supporting have not made the progress. Then they thought they could get Saleh and his men on the side to use them as their ground forces. Then he was killed, and the whole his own party is dissolving and bogged down in a fight with the Houthis in the north. The southern coalition, which is led by the UAE, themselves are trying to move from ties closer towards Hodeidah, trying to take the port. But here also, I mean, there have been regional, very local progress has been made on the tactical level. The issue, though, is that on the strategic level, the military wing, the air power wing of this Saudi coalition doesn't have the punch, because it can't really achieve what a ground force actually has to achieve. If you don't have a capable ground force to actually seize and hold territory, there's nothing that air power can do, particularly when air power targeting is so poorly done.
Nabil Khouri, what do you make of that? Is this conflict any closer to ending anytime soon, or is it completely intractable, a quagmire?
It's a relative question. By killing Ali Abdullah Saleh, the Houthis have definitely shot themselves in the foot in a big way, weakening themselves politically by losing most of the ex-ruling party, the GPC, and militarily by losing at least half of the armed forces that were loyal to Ali Abdullah Saleh. Now, with the reappearance of Tariq Saleh, the nephew of the former president, inside Yemen, and apparently working with Ali Muhsin al-Ahmar. Now the coalition led by Saudi Arabia is in a much stronger position and making moves towards Hodeidah and towards breaking the Houthi siege around Taiz. If the Houthis lose Hodeidah and Taiz, they've essentially lost the war. Now, the question is, if you are trying to achieve a total defeat of the Houthis, how long would this take and what price? And here is the problem, is that even with the loss of Hodeidah and Taiz, the Houthis would still be strong in Sana'a and further north in Saada. Also, on the ground, which is where it matters the most, the coalition against them is divided, is working at cross purposes sometimes, and therefore they would not be able to stabilize any territory recovered from the Houthis, which means a prolonged war at one level or another. The sad part of this is that at some point, this war has to end in a political agreement. So what would be the point of thousands upon thousands more casualties if you could strike a bargain right now? And here's the sad part, is that I don't think they're about to strike a bargain. The Houthis are not politically astute. In fact, they were quite stupid in killing Saleh. And it seems Saudi Arabia, under its new leader, is intent on a complete military victory. So I don't see anything in the year ahead, 2018, other than more fighting, more casualties, and more suffering by the Yemeni people.
Andreas, so if there was a serious international effort to end this conflict, could it actually be done? Yemen is not Syria, it's not Libya. I suppose you could draw parallels with Afghanistan, or could you? Can a comprehensive peace deal ever be reached in Yemen, given the tribal nature of much of its society? And will it just continue to experience ongoing strife of some sort going into the future, that just being the very nature of Yemen?
Exactly. It's the very nature of Yemen. We have to understand that Yemen has never been a unitary nation state. It's never really applied to the Western idea of having territoriality and sovereignty. There are multiple conflicts that were always simmering within Yemen, and these multiple conflicts all need to be somewhat addressed. Under Ali Abdullah Saleh, he was able to kind of keep a lid on most of it by playing one side against the other. But, you know, we have, over the last couple of years, always looked at it from a binary point of view. The media has either portrayed the Houthis as the evil and then the Hadi government as the good government. So it's like black and white. But also even the UN has looked at it in a binary way, has looked as the Houthi Saleh coalition versus the South and those, the UAE Saudi coalition, and bringing those two sides together. In reality, I mean, especially since the Arab Spring and since Ali Abdullah Saleh has been ousted and then returned, I mean, this conflict, this country has really erupted into multiple conflicts. So any comprehensive solution has to be an inclusive one where all the different parties have to come to the table. And the problem with the UN approach is that a lot of the other very important players on the ground have not been included. They're not even part of the approach that the UN is taking or the international community is taking. So really what is needed then is something similar to the 2012 national dialogue, which has to be inclusive, and it has to be that inclusive to also include the Houthis. And I think that was part of the problem, that the Houthis were somewhat alienated into leaving the national dialogue. And I think now the UAE-Saudi coalition, they seem to think that a solution could be found, even with Al-Islah, which the UAE opposed initially because they are affiliated or used to be affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, but they don't want to talk to the Houthis. And the thing with the Houthis is, and that's why I think there is a great comparison to be done here with Afghanistan, is that they are very much a mountainous people who know how to operate as a guerrilla insurgency force within a certain environment. What they are not good at is politics. They're not good at actual engagement and reaching out, also because they have been alienated multiple times before by various coalitions. And by alienating them further, by not including them in the process, you're actually exacerbating the problem. At the moment, I think the Houthis think that they can still win in the north. Although they have been politically weakened and somewhat militarily weakened, they can fight another day because they just retreat to the northwestern part of Yemen where they come from, where they originate. They don't have the ambition to rule all over Yemen. And a comprehensive solution for Yemen means we need to address all these other conflicts that are going on in the northeast, that are going on in the south, and that are going on in the Hadramaut in the east. So I think we're looking at least 4 or 5 different conflicts with different tribal factions that can be brought together. So the new balance means all these parties have to be included.
Nabil Khoury, are the UN and international powers being too simplistic in their approach to finding peace in Yemen, this binary approach that we heard about? To what extent are they talking to the wrong people in their attempts to bring peace to Yemen?
I think both UN diplomacy as well as United States diplomacy, both have been very limited in terms of the people they've approached. American diplomacy has practically been missing. The UN, unfortunately, right now, other than limiting itself to the people it's talking to, also is not moving with good political skills. I think right now there are 2 possible approaches to peace. One is going back to the UN, to the Security Council specifically, to produce a new resolution that would hopefully have unanimity within the Council and would start fresh with a new approach, given that the former resolution 2216 is now pretty much obsolete. Failing a consensus at the Security Council, and I think it's very hard to achieve that consensus, the Yemeni parties need to forget about the region, forget about the United Nations, and forge peace among one another. For that to happen, you need a national leader of stature, a strong figure who could inspire the Yemeni people, inspire all the Yemeni factions, including the Houthis, to bring them together and say, let's hammer out an agreement. If the Yemenis agree with one another, no power outside can destroy that. No power outside can continue the war if they themselves agree with one another. Unfortunately, right now, the Houthis are not showing that kind of political skill or leadership to inspire the country. They failed miserably. As Hakim said, they're a good guerrilla movement, but they're not good at ruling. With the death of Saleh, with all that one can say for him or against him, he was a very strong leader, a national figure. There's no one else right now with that kind of stature. Hadi is certainly not the person to do it. So again, I'm not optimistic.
All right.
But while waiting for a Nelson Mandela of Yemen to appear, I'm afraid we're just going to see more misery for the year ahead.
Well, let's hear from Sana. Hakim Al-Maswari, are you optimistic or pessimistic about finding a solution in the near term to this conflict? Where does the blame for the continuation of it lie? With the Houthis, the Saudi-led coalition, Iran, the US, the UK, who?
All sides are to blame. All sides are trying to flex their muscles in the war and not on the political dialogue or trying to reach a solution. It's very sad to see that in Sana'a right now, the Houthis have basically no worry if this war continues for months and months or even longer than that, they feel that they are powerful, they are stronger than they were last year. But this is not the case, because after the death of ex-President Saleh, it's a different story. Over the last couple of weeks, we visited numerous of the GPC officials to their houses, trying to join them with the Houthi officials, trying to put them back on their feet. They have to be involved in this political solution, in the circle itself. Without the GPC, the Houthis have no chance. I don't see any hope in a peaceful resolution being reached without the GPC standing again on their feet, putting their sufferings behind, and taking lead in the political table. This will take time. As of now, sadly or unfortunately, most of the GPC officials, the Saleh party officials, are under house arrest. They do move, but in their houses there are numerous Houthi intel or officials who are with them all day. So they need to restore their power in order to for this wheel to move. They have the experience, they have the political experience, the negotiation experience, unlike the Houthis, who are mainly focused on military activities and gathering intelligence. So the only way I see that the political wheel will be moving is if the GPC starts standing again on their feet, and the UN has to have a strong role. It's very sad that over the last year or so, last week, the first visit of a UN official over the last 10 months alone. So a complete stalemate by the UN side on one hand, and lack of cooperation from both the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthis here in Sana'a. So,
Hakeem, you talk about the Houthis' lack of you talk about the Houthis' lack of political experience. There's evidence to suggest that key political players in Yemen are benefiting from the war economy. It's not exactly in the Houthis' interests to bring this conflict to a close, is it?
I, some way or the other, agree with that, because right now they are in control entirely in areas they control. There are no rights given to the citizens when it comes to salaries, electricity, etc. They have no intention of handing over salaries, and if they do, 1 month a year. So they have no side that's pushing them to enforce, to give the rights to the people who are under their control. So this gives the Houthis more power internally, but locally and among the people, generally, their reputation is not doing well. Most of the people in Sana'a are not allied with them, but because of fear of aggression or fear of having problems with the Houthis, they stay quiet or ignore any complications with them. But again, it's not about the Houthis, it's not about the GPC party or the Saudi-led coalition allies. It's about how to end this war as soon as possible to save the millions of lives who are suffering. And if the UN, international community, and the world powers do not interfere politically, then this war can take a very long time to solve. And as of now, over the last 18 months, no side has gained ground on the ground militarily. Each side has gained a couple of kilometers here and there, but in general, there has been no side gaining ground in either way.
Okay.
So the only way to reach a solution is politically and through dialogue.
Andreas Krieg, you were talking about the shifting sands in Yemen. To what extent is time of the essence, not only to bring about an end to the suffering, but given the ever-changing alliances on the ground, is there not a danger that the situation could simply become too complex to solve?
Yemen has always been complex. Obviously, I completely agree with what the previous speaker said. I mean, the problem in Yemen is that we have an international, it's a proxy war whereby different international powers have their stakes in a conflict which essentially was a Yemeni conflict. But the problem is that any weakness that Yemenis show or different parties show, the more divided the Yemenis are, the more they invite people to interfere from outside. And I think that is pretty much the key problem here. The problem is that, yes, the Emiratis have their own policy towards the south of Yemen. The Saudis have their own policy towards the north of Yemen. At least they pretend to have an objective to be achieved. The GCC as such doesn't exist anymore. There is no common GCC approach. There is no, and then there are many other parties that are not represented by internationals. The problem is also the absence of US leadership. More than that, even the US administration, the Trump administration, seems to be backing the Saudi-led coalition, giving them a blanco check to do whatever they deem necessary without actually trying to mediate. So you have a multitude of different actors trying to thrive of what's going on domestically. And then obviously domestically, you have local order. You don't have a Yemeni order. There is no such thing as a Yemeni nation, but there is a local order that somewhat is keeping the country going, but at a very, very low level. So, I mean, until people come to a realization that there is nothing further to be gained from military action, and I think the Houthis are still not at a point where they think they have nothing more to gain, until that point, fighting will continue. So what the international community should do is really address the nation states who are involved in it. And that is in Iran, and that is Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and to a lesser extent also the United States. They need to sit together and try to find a solution in order to enable those people on the ground to make concessions. If you keep giving money, if you keep on weaponizing, if you keep the military wing going, I do think that parties on the ground have no incentive to actually sit down and talk to one another, and actually that will be more dividing. Okay. The longer the war exists, the more dividing it will get.
Nabil Khoury, do you agree with that? Should external actors who have interests in Yemen, should they be involved in peace talks? Would any attempt to ignore them be successful?
Well, I mean, obviously, the ideal thing would be for international actors to put diplomacy first and to put peace first and to push very hard to make that happen. The two parties that could do that are the United States and Saudi Arabia. But the reality is that neither Saudi Arabia nor the US seems to be interested in doing that. The US keeps supplying arms to the Saudi-led coalition. The Saudis keep pushing for a total victory, and some people inside Yemen are supporting that idea. The UN has been flailing about without good leadership and good skills. So as a result, I don't think there's any hope of internationally reaching a solution that way. That's why I say perhaps the burden should be on the Yemenis. It is difficult to ignore foreign powers, the regional especially, because they have so much vested interest. But then peace is never easy. Hakeem, the main thing is to get some sense of national unity going.
I'm sorry, Nabil, to interrupt you. Hakeem Al-Masmari, we're almost out of time. What do you make of that? Where does the key to solving the intractable problem that is Yemen lie? I mean, what's it going to take to get this war to end? This, as it was described by the UN's humanitarian coordinator for Yemen, as an absurd war.
It's very complicated, but and the problem is that most of the people or the sides who are involved right now in the Yemeni solution or file are not aware or don't understand Yemen in general. They have to understand Yemen to reach a solution. The UN envoy, the Sheikh, he tried his best. He gave efforts, but it seemed that he didn't understand the sides of Yemen, the history of Yemen, the sides wants, how the complications live. Nabil was here many years ago during the ex-president's time, and he knows how complicated it is. So involving experts who know Yemen, involving experts who know how to reach a solution, who know the people on the ground. It's not enough to talk from outside or talk to the officials. You have to know on the ground what's happening and know how to reach a solution, know the power makers on the ground, the tribal leaders, the political officials who are not in the scene right now, but they have a lot of influence. They could be Yemeni as well, who are now residing in Cairo, etc. Okay. So these sides who are respected by all the political parties in Yemen, whether by the Saudi allies, by the Houthi coalition, they're being sidelined. So these people should be given more power, more influence, along with the UN, to try to help reach a political solution, rather just focusing on the militarily and having just UN statements every month or so.
Hakeem, we're out of time. Many thanks indeed, gentlemen, for taking part in today's discussion. Hakeem Al-Masmari, Nabil Khoury, and Andreas Krieg. Thank you for watching. Don't forget you can see the programme at any time just by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter, our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.